my hope is really just to, inspire you if you're considering a trip with us, that maybe you can make this happen. If you're just looking for tips and ideas, hopefully give you some other ways to think about training that might be outside of like the typical customary ways you think about what you need to prepare for. Again, this is kind of my take. And the type of people who can go backpacking with us, or who can go backpacking in general, I think is a wide range. So you can have someone who's very experienced. This is a gentleman named Jan. He had actually done 7 of our trips between the age of 70 and 77 years old. And he had done all of them, which is incredible. And here's a picture of him. He did lots of training in the Bay Area. He would go up to Mission Peak. That was kind of his go-to spot. A big hike up and down where he'd like work himself up and down. That's on the left. On the right-hand side, he also did some big trips out to Everest, to the base camp and stuff like that. And so someone experienced like him, often he's been on many of our trips. We have people, this is just like a wide range of people from all different ages, all different backgrounds, all different skill sets. Here they are at 12,000 feet in the middle of the Sierra at Colby Pass. Again, anyone could kind of make this happen. And then we have young groups. This is a group of families that we had that was out with us kind of on the private custom group for the summer. And here they are at Helferscher Lake, which is kind of in the central part of the Sierra on our Helferscher route. That little younger boy, he crushed it. He was a strong young kid, played soccer, and just, took him a day or two to get used to wearing a pack. But once he got used to having a pack, by the third or fourth day, you really couldn't catch him. And then same thing with the Grand Canyon. Again, all different backgrounds, all different ages, all different shapes and sizes. We try and hopefully inspire everyone that, you can make this happen, including first-time backpackers. This is a group of 5th graders that we had backpacking with us going across the Sierra, that Trans-Sierra trip to Mount Whitney that I know Jonathan's considering. Here they are. This is the one on the far left is my daughter, actually. And this was their first ever backpacking trip, and they all crushed it. 3 of them have come back and done a second trip. So it was awesome to see. So just to keep that in mind, like I want to think about like where you fit in that spectrum as you think about training. And everyone's coming from different backgrounds, different locations. I'm going to give you some ideas to think about like what you need to focus on to make your experience as like successful as possible. And in order to do that, you have to kind of understand what you're training for. And the most basic way people think about like training is like, okay, I got to hike across something and its distance and elevation. I would say that's kind of table stakes. This is like one example, the route we've been running since 2011, 2012. This is a week-long hike across the Sierra to Mount Whitney. We're going to cover about 75 miles, 14,000 feet of elevation is the highest point at Mount Whitney. You might have this goal of making it to the summit, which is awesome. We can do that. We can make that happen. The route, if you think about the elevation profile for this type of route, it's not linear. There's a lot of up and down and up and down. In fact, in total, it's about 20,000 feet of elevation gain and about 18,000 feet of elevation loss over the course of a week on the trail. So it's not just one linear thing. There's a lot of variation on there. The Grand Canyon, which I know Adam and Tatiana, which you guys are looking at, this is a typical loop that we do when we have that Grand Canyon challenge, about 25 to 30 miles, kind of depending on how the permit works. And the views when you get kind of like right in the middle are incredible. Like you're going to have views looking 1,000 feet down to the inner gorge, all the way across to the rim. The profile of like the distance and elevation profile to make something like this happen looks a little bit like this. So mentally, you can kind of get this in mind. About a mile of descent, roughly speaking, some ups and downs perhaps along the way. You hit the river. We at least have one night on the Colorado River, and then working your way back up onto what's called a Tonto platform, kind of this inner plateau within the canyon, and then back up to the rim over the course of like 25, roughly speaking, plus miles, give or take. I know everyone's coming from different interests. I think we may have some people who are interested in kind of the Helferscher route that we do, which is this trip's a little bit different. It's in the Central Sierra. It's about 8 to 10 miles of off-travel trail. The route, the pictures might look like this. This is actually Mount Goddard in the background. It's a big, burly 13,500 foot mountain that we go and summit. Wyatt led a group up near the summit this past year. And this is a shot from Red Mountain, which is kind of like a highlight. And the elevation profile for this type of route, it definitely has some sharp ups and downs, and you feel that, and some miles that are off trail as well. So think about kind of, the elevation peaks, the falls. Here we're going up about, what's it say, 13,000 feet. I'm sorry, 10,000 feet of gain and 10,000 feet of loss, roughly speaking. And then just one more example of like elevation and profiles. This is one of our newer routes that we have out in the Sierra to Hippity Valley. Hippity Valley is a little bit like Yosemite Valley, but with no people. And the route out to Hippity Valley, it's a little bit more moderate, but there's a big drop in the middle. In fact, you're going to drop about 2.5 miles, 3,000 plus feet over about 2.5 miles. And Wyatt can attest that this is, when you think about that mileage, it's not the type of mileage you would have if you're walking around the block. All right. So, any questions about kind of these elevation profiles and maybe where you may or may not see yourself on these? Stuart, go for it. Jump in.
Hi, so my question is this for a beginner? The one that you're showing right now?
So all of the trips are open to beginners if you'd like it. I would say they're all going to push you a little bit in different ways, though. This trip in particular, the trip to Tippity Valley, the elevation profile isn't that difficult, but the trail itself is extremely rugged. And so one of the benefits of working with us, I say about a third of the people who backpack with us is their first ever overnight backpacking trip. And we've had beginners do all of these routes. It really depends on how motivated you are, kind of your willingness to kind of try something different. So now I want to talk about a few, that's kind of the table stakes from my perspective. Like, how do you prepare for a trip, knowing what you're getting yourself into, mileage wise, elevation wise, rise and falls and getting up and down hills. But I think if you are an experienced backpacker or you've been on some of our trips, I'm trying to think I think only Wyatt. Do we have any return people here at the moment? Anyone jump in? No, we do not. Kristen, which Kristen is that there? Is Kristen here?
Yep, that's me. I'm a return person.
There she is. I thought so. Is that Kristen Young?
Yep, that's me.
So
hey there, Chris.
Hey, Kristen. So I'd love to I think from my perspective, that's only part of the solution, part of the part of the calculus is like the distance. But Kristen, what other challenges did you have in particular? I'm gonna throw it out to you in terms of like doing a trip like this.
When I did it, it was the Grand Canyon, and as our guide told us at the time, Grand Canyon miles are different than than regular miles. So it's just much different backpacking with a big heavy pack on than it is regular hiking, and then all the elevation gain and ups and downs, and we had to do some route finding, so that was a little more challenging. So
you won the Escalante route, was that right?
Yeah, I did.
That one's awesome. It's a little spicy, but but pretty fun.
It is spicy, but it was great. I loved it.
So definitely like miles that you think about like training on a trail, maybe in your local parks or your local, outdoors, open spaces are a little bit different than hiking on some of the routes that we do. I would say extremely different. If I had to characterize them, the Tippity Valley trip, the trail is extremely rugged. Some of the Grand Canyon routes that we do, the trails are extremely rugged. And then everything else kind of has trails and kind of off-trail exposure in between. I'm going to show you a little bit about what that looks like. But in addition to like the basics, you also have to think about preparing yourself for full days. Here's a group in this picture that is summiting Mount Whitney in the evening time. So they're coming off the mountain now. And here's what it might feel like if you're going to be walking off Mount Whitney. That was one of our youth trips. They had been up in the morning, got themselves to a certain spot, had a nice little break in the lunch, and then decided once the clouds had gone away and there was no risk of lightning to make the summit. We also have full packs. I think Tatiana, you were asking about pack weight. Typically speaking, in the Grand Canyon, the packs are going to be about 25 to 30 pounds of weight when you start out, and that gets a little bit lighter time. We do have links to checklists, and I'm going to have an email that goes out to you guys right afterwards with links to our checklist where you can download them. If you follow the checklist and kind of dial in your gear, you're going to be prepared with a lightweight pack. When you start to add these like incremental, like 1 or 2 items, luxury items, they add up quickly, and that's when your pack weight can start to inch up. If you're out in the Sierra, typically speaking, we want your pack weight to top out between 35 and 40 pounds, fully loaded. If you're over 40 pounds, you're probably carrying too much. Here's a group that's getting ready to begin their trip. I think they're on the Helfashire or Mount Goddard Loop. Early starts. So all 3 of these things, if you're not used to hiking kind of late in the afternoon, if you're not used to hiking with a full pack, this is something you want to think about training. how can I incorporate this into my training to get myself used to it? Maybe you're not a morning person, but typically speaking, in the Grand Canyon, if it's a warm day, perhaps it's around in May, we may be on the trail by 5 or 5:30 a.m. and we're going to try and hike before the sun comes up, before the heat really digs in, so we can get to a spot where it's cooler and shadier later that afternoon. That might not always be the case, but oftentimes early starts are even used in the Sierra because it just allows us to get more, it adds more optionality into the day. When you kind of start early, you have more flexibility to make adjustments, make changes, beat an afternoon thunderstorm. And so keep in mind, if you're not an early morning person, it might be a good idea to set your alarm clock early, so you can get yourself up out of bed and then go for a long hike. And how does your body respond? How do you feel about it? Their trails sometimes look like this. There are boulders and scree. This is part of the Mount Goddard route that we do. This is the off-trail section. And so balance, knowing that there's some hand and foot scrambling. In addition to this, as you actually approach the summit of Mount Goddard, which is, I would argue, one of the more challenging routes that we have, if not the most physically demanding route that we have, there's moments like this where it's loose. And so we're gonna go very slow, taking your time, walking on kind of loose scree and talus sections. What else are we training for? We're training for intense uphill. So this is a picture on the Trans-Sierra route. And on the third or fourth day, after you've been hiking downhill for quite a while, there's a short, intense uphill, maybe only about 200, 300 feet, but it winds straight up a mountain. And we call this Chocolate Ridge. And so you can see here, it's a pretty intense uphill experience. So we're going to be training to go uphill and also be training to go downhill. Sometimes it can be difficult to find experiences that are up and downhill if you live in Chicago, for example, where there's not a lot of elevation. But I know one thing Chicago does have is they have like tall buildings, tall parking complexes, other things like that, maybe great football stadiums, where you can find something nearby where you can find ways to move yourself up and down and kind of get that elevation. I would say in particular, Tatiana, what is one of the most challenging aspects of backpacking in the Grand Canyon is the very first day. And that's because it's really difficult to prepare for like 7 to 9 miles of intense downhill. Like there's no place else you can really do that except for the Grand Canyon. And so working in some workouts where if you have the luxury to throw in a pack and get some downhill experience, take the elevator up and just walk down the stairs, take the elevator up. Anything you could do to kind of get those downhill muscles kind of firmed up is probably in your benefit. Hiking in wet boots. I'll pause there. Any questions for a moment? Kind of rolling through these quickly. Just my hope is that you find something like, oh yeah, I can work on that one. that might be something I could focus on. Question?
Chris, are you going to get to talking about like specific training recommendations to enhance our skill, ability, and all these things?
I'm going to refer you to a site. My hope is like I'll refer you to. I do have like an example, but I'm going to say it's different for everyone. In the sense that like, everyone has like their own personal lifestyle and requirements, and for some people, it's realistic to go on a big elevation hike, a couple times, every other week and do something big.
Yeah.
Other people, they don't have that luxury. And so it's not ideal. Some people are avid bicyclists. Some people are avid like avid like, play basketball. Maybe they do pickleball, tennis, whatever your sport might be. Other people are runners, like weightlifters. Like I think the core thing, the most important thing is to increase the intensity of your workouts like you're preparing for an event. So having that core cardio is really important. Increasing the intensity, and then also, eating well is a part of the experience. I do have a specific plan at the very end, which I'll show you, which I use for my kids and for myself. But I'm gonna let you take that and modify it how you guys see fit, if that helps. Is that okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, and I get it. Like everybody's going to do like their own thing a little differently. I was more like general recommendations, particularly like for how to cope with altitude. I mean, I think I've read focusing on like increasing VO2 max is important. Things like so. Just any words of wisdom you have around that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say getting yourself in the best cardio shape possible is really important. That's just like your full body, your core body is important. Your next thing is your legs, right? So making sure you're going to use these stabilizer muscles that are a little bit different. So going on hikes, going on hikes in uneven terrain. And then the third thing is like getting used to the weight. So having a pack weight on your shoulders is kind of the three things you got to keep thinking about: getting your legs strong and used to very terrain, getting used to a pack weight, and then making sure you have good cardio. And after that, it becomes more of a mental thing more than anything, from my perspective. I will give some more specifics though. And hey, Wyatt, I'm not sure if you have perspective as well based on your experience. If you're still there, I'm gonna have you jump in.
Yeah, hey Chris. I think the pack weight might be the most important aspect after the cardio, especially for people who live in more flat areas. I started to do it a lot a couple years ago. You feel kind of silly at first, but if you just put a full pack on, make sure it's like 25 pounds and just walk around, that's really good for just getting your body used to just carrying that weight. That's kind of what I noticed more than anything else people having a hard time with in the first couple of days is just they're like, oh, I went on all these long hikes, but I never carried anything that weighed this much. So it's like just getting used to that, and your body will get used to stabilizing yourself while you're walking around with that pack weight on. I think that would be a big one. Is just getting that weight on you and getting used to walking around with it.
Absolutely. I think you could also multitask. Maybe, you say you take the dog out for a walk for a couple miles every morning, like throw a pack on. Like what else can how can you add to it? So
Yeah, exactly.
go ahead, Al or AI.
Hi. Yeah. So, I have to attend your session for several times and asking question about the training. So certainly, as you mentioned, different people have a different requirement. But for me, first of all, I'm an outdoor person, and I also do a lot of exercise, running, sports, and I've been training with people who go to PCT every year for 2-3 years already. And so myself, I think I'm physically, strength, everything seems no problem. However, the main thing that always get me is I cannot sleep at night in the tent. And for all of my life, every time I try, always fail. 2 years ago, I joined a 2-day hiking to San Gorgonio with a group. So after one day of good hike, we camped at the 9200. So I thought I was tired. I should be able to sleep, but I still couldn't sleep. I only slept for maybe 30 minutes. Last year, I bought a tent and I tried to train myself in my backyard. I set up the tent on a flat ground along on my backyard. I couldn't sleep. So people told me, well, if you go to a multi-day hiking, you get so tired, you will, fall into sleep. So I wonder, you guys have a lot of experience going with the different people, different group. So do you know how people, deal with this situation? Have you heard about, people say, oh, I couldn't sleep in the tent. And then when they join your group, join this kind of multi-day hiking, are they turn out be able to sleep okay or something? Do you have this experience? Can you tell me something about this?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Is it Al or is that correct?
L, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a great question, Al. And you're not alone to have that challenge. In fact, I have a hard time sleeping myself when I'm out there. Many people actually have similar challenges. Sometimes it's the altitude. Sometimes it's just the environment of sleeping in a tent that feels so different. Sometimes it's not being able to get comfortable on the ground. Sometimes it's a different diet, which is making you feel different at times. I sleep out many times, and I would say I don't sleep very well at all. That being said, I do rest, and many people do rest. And oftentimes in the morning we wake up we ask people, did you have a nice rest? Because we often know if we ask, did you have a nice sleep? The answer is, I didn't sleep at all. Like, it's not that you're in the majority probably. Most people don't sleep that well. I will say at some point though, people do sleep well, and oftentimes they get tired enough where they do zonk out. It's amazing though how the body recovers though over time, and like that rest, you can still bounce back and still be a super productive and have a great day the following day as well. But I'll also open up to other people who have experience, Wyatt or Jonathan or others who may have their own perspective on that as well.
I don't know. Well, for example, those are that 2 day of San Gorgonio hike.
Mhm.
I only spent one night in the tent, and I only got 30 minutes sleep. So 2 days of hike is probably okay. I could deal with it. But for example, I'm very interested in this Trans-Sierra 7 nights trip. But if I couldn't sleep for 3-4 days or the entire trip, I don't know if I can survive that trip.
Yeah, that's a good question. Go ahead, Jonathan. Jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I've the first trip I did was 5 nights, I think, and I was terrified of this issue. And I've done several, several trips now and about that length, and yeah, I mean, for me, Chris, kind of like you said, it's hard. I generally manage to get about 6 hours, I find, but it's often hard to get to sleep, especially because like usually trying to go to sleep earlier than normal. So I think that's where like the mental part of it really comes in, and like being able to have a conversation with yourself that you're not going to die if you don't sleep well. I don't know if that helps at all, but I think Al, you're not alone in that issue.
So, some people do use sleeping aids. I know there are people who do that out there. I don't recommend it, or that's a personal decision that you would have to use. Oftentimes, eventually, your body does catch up with itself, and you feel great when you get that good night's sleep. Wyatt or Kristen, do you guys have experience with this? Just curious how you guys feel.
I personally haven't ever had that hard of a time sleeping in the backcountry. Maybe that's just because I have a lot of practice. But based on the people we've taken out before, Chris, and then on some of my other trips, sometimes people will have trouble the first couple of days, but I don't think I've ever seen someone last 5 to 7. Like by day 5, they're sleeping pretty well. I've never encountered someone who isn't able to sleep the whole time. And a lot of times the people that do know they might have trouble with that bring, like you said, sleep aids, melatonin, or they have a special tea they like that they know that helps them go to sleep. And even that might not work the first couple of days, but once they're good and tired, it usually seems to turn out pretty fine.
Cool. Thanks, Wyatt.
I've used melatonin before, and then I also find that it took me a while to find the right backpacking pillow. I know, just to be more comfortable and to make it feel more. I mean, I obviously can't bring my home pillow, but just to get a system down so that it felt more comfortable to me and more like home. And then sometimes I just can't sleep because I'm too excited about what the next day brings. So, yeah.
I would say that's good. That's good. Kristen, is that like the first night or two, oftentimes people are excited, especially the first night of the trailhead. You're nervous, you're excited. It's in a good way, right? It's like that good kind of giddy feeling that you're going to be doing something that's completely new and exciting. And the first night or two, you might feel like that, and by the third night, your body might realize it just needs to shut down and help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps. Just adds perspective. There's no magic bullet, but hopefully that kind of rounds out your perspective of what you may or may not expect and how other people manage that situation out there.
Yeah, sure. I never get to ask this kind of question in a big group like this, and different people's experience or what they think. So that really helped. This is just something I never succeed to to get into it. So I'll have to think about it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. You can also try, there's different pads. Some people like, there's the air mattress, there's the foam mattress. Some people sleep better like on the more cushy air mattresses, air pads. And so
Right.
that may have an impact as well. But
Mhm.
that's when you have to kind of test out, and see what works for you.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Great question. And thank you for bringing it up. I appreciate that. I'm going to talk about just, again, that is a challenge. And that might be something you need to train for. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's like how to sleep in the wilderness, how to wake up, get up early. How to get comfortable hiking in marshy, kind of wet shoes. In 2023, 2019, 2017, 2011, these are all monster snow years in the Sierra. And much of the trail was like underwater or like flooded, especially early in the season. And so you'd have kids, like people hiking through kind of wet trail pretty regularly. And oftentimes you're just walking through and you were not stopping to change your shoes. This is what the kids call stage 4 raisin foot toe disease. And it's not uncommon to have this at the end of the day. So getting used to hiking in wet shoes or wet boots. Most of the people have today transitioned to trail runners or something like a lighter weight shoe or lighter weight boot. We often encourage people, especially for our Sierra trips, to have something with like lots of mesh on the outside of it. That way the water can come in and then you can keep hiking. The water can go back out. You don't have to worry about changing your shoes or changing your socks. You just keep on hiking through the streams with wet shoes. That's also handy when you're hiking in the rain. And this is something you might need to train for. If you never forced yourself to get out and hike in like a cold, rainy drizzle, that could be on your training list. Next time it's raining in February or March, or even in January, depending where you are at, throw on your rain jacket, test out your gear, and do that training hike in the rain. You might be surprised on the mental challenges.
Olivier, mountain man. Snow, rain, hail cannot stop this man from his destination.
I would say this is
How's it feel? Awesome. Protected.
This is a big part of the challenge that's out there is the elements. And so the more you can kind of prepare yourself for those elements, the better. It might actually look a little bit like this, where you're going to be crossing a stream in the rain. And it really can become a mental challenge. I know Wyatt and I were on a trip together this past summer where we had like 5 of the 6 days we were out there had rain and considerable amounts of rain for most of those 5 or 6 days. And 1 or 2 days is okay. After 5 or 6 days, it can be a little bit of a mental challenge. Hiking over snow, one of the challenges. And so hard to train for this one, but knowing kind of mentally what you're getting yourself into is important. Hiking in snow. This is a trip that we had in August of, I think it was 2020, where we got caught in a late, early summer snowstorm up near the summit of Mount Whitney. And so even though it's a summer hike, you just have to be prepared that there's going to be some pretty rugged conditions out there. Mentally preparing yourself hiking with exposure in the Grand Canyon, especially. By exposure, I mean where there's ledges or areas with like high heights. No, that's part of the experience and part of the challenge. And then time away from family. And I think this is maybe an overlooked experience, but we're out there for 3, 5, 7 days. There's no internet, no email, no cell phone. We're away from our family, whether it's our brothers or sisters or our sons or daughters, our mothers or fathers, whoever it might be, your loved ones. There's no connection. And so having kind of those pictures loaded up on your phone or maybe a special memento to take with you, sometimes a good reminder to kind of like have your happy thought and carry it with you to go forward. And that can be a bigger challenge, that emotional, mental challenge, than some people recognize. Now, any one of these challenges is something that all of us on this trip can overcome at any given time. But when you string them all together over the course of a week, this is what kind of a TSX challenge is all about, right? It's long days, the full pack, little sleep, which we finally got on here, right? Uphill, downhill, like all of these items together is what you're gonna have to rise to the challenge to. So just keep that in mind. And that's where this really becomes kind of that physical the mental, and the emotional challenge. It's all three of these elements that you have to kind of prepare yourself for before you hit the trail. Any questions? Q&A? You guys been asking questions. I'll keep it going. We've kind of been going through this Q&A discussion, but I'm not sure if anyone else would like to talk about like what they do to prepare for a trip like this. Jonathan, you have any thoughts?
Well, this is sort of a question. So over the last, say, 3-4 years, I've had a pretty good regular cardio routine. I've added strength training to that recently. But I've done, like I said, I've done 5-day trips that I'd say in terms of distance and altitude are about half as hard as, or distance and gain and less altitude, but like half as hard as the Trans-Sierra thing. So I'm just, what's my question here? Like I'm looking for ideas on how to get more out of my training. I think I can do more hikes with a weighted pack. But yeah, any other ideas? And also, since you are accustomed to leading people who have less experience and who, maybe are a little older or whatever, can you say a little bit about like, I know you said last time I was on a call with you, people go at different paces, but how slow is too slow, and how do you make sure that people are really? Do you do any screening? Sorry, that was a stack of questions, but
That's okay.
those made sense.
Those are great questions, and it is a little bit of a challenge. Like there's sometimes a little bit of a self-selection process. Like we do call these a challenge. People who come into these trips are often like open to that, and so they're willing to push themselves and try a little differently. And luckily that there is a self-selection when people are ready for that. That being said, not everyone comes in at kind of the same level or the same with the same skill set. There are slower hikers, there are faster hikers. If you're a faster hiker, you take your breaks at certain checkpoints. If you're a slower hiker, you take your breaks kind of on the trail. This is a team effort though, and so we do have to get everyone from point A to point B. Everyone gonna take their own time. That's cool. We take a hike at their own pace, but we're gonna work together if we need to speed you up at certain times, or like it's getting dark. I know Wyatt and I had a trip where we were on the trip, and there was one person in particular who was a little bit slower, and so we ended up breaking up a little bit, breaking down her pack, lightening things up until she can kind of get up to speed, get up to the altitude that was impacting her. And over 2 or 3 days, she kind of got back into kind of the same group, the same kind of rhythm or system as the rest of the group. But it took a couple of days to kind of get there. I'm not sure if that was a long-winded question for part of your answer. The other part, what was the other part of your question? Sorry about that.
Well, again, and maybe this will come in your example later, but like any ideas for increasing the effectiveness of the training I'm doing?
Sure. So let's talk about setting goals. And so I think, hey, Joshua, if you had the question, go ahead. Before going to this next one.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to loop back to the hiking in wet environments with a question. I've heard some people swear by hiking in sandals, like specific sandals, and one of the advantages being that your feet can stay dry because of the air circulation. Do you guys have thoughts on hiking in sandals from experience?
It's your own personal preference. I have hiked with people who have hiked in sandals, sometimes by choice, sometimes not by choice. And you want something with a heel strap on the back of it, like people have hiked in Chacos in the Grand Canyon before.
Mm-hmm.
My personal take is I think for a longer trip like this week-long hike across the Sierra, you probably need a little bit more. If again you are an experienced hiker and that is your thing and you've done it, train like that and then do what you trained for. I guess the one thing I would say is don't feel like you have to change something just because you're going backpacking. And that would go with your footwear, with your socks, whatever it is. As long as you're training for it, you like it, it works for you, that's okay. Your feet might get cold. If you're backpacking over snow, you're not gonna have much traction in sandals, and it's gonna be hard to put micro spikes and crampons on. So that probably wouldn't be the best fit. If you're backpacking in the Grand Canyon, it's a warmer environment. hiking through water and warming up right away is probably not a big deal. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I can add to that briefly too,
Go ahead.
if you don't mind. I think I've seen people hike really long distances in sandals. Someone I know hiked the whole PCT in sandals. So if that's something that you're comfortable doing, then definitely. But I find that trail runners, kind of the newer shoes people hike in, will dry out pretty fast when you're hiking in them. So if you hike through a river, 20 minutes later, if you keep walking, your shoe's going to be almost dry. Your socks, not so much, but you should keep a extra pair of dry socks to change into when you get into your tent and whatnot anyway. But yeah, just keeping in mind that your shoes will dry if you're wearing breathable shoes. And also, I think cold is a big one. Even if your shoes are wet on that trip that Chris was talking about where it rained for 5 days, we were wet to the bone, my shoes and socks included, but my feet were still warm even though they were wet because of the shoes and socks. I don't know if that would be the case in sandals or not. So I would advocate for shoes too, personally.
Yeah, it treats it's like a wetsuit, kind of like it's insulating itself on those cool days. Yeah. Thanks, Wyatt. Maybe Jonathan, just going back to your question, ideas to prepare is, I think no matter, set a schedule out. Let's say you're 6, 8, 12, 14 weeks out, however much you're going to plan out. You have your calendar out. If you're going to literally write in your training schedule, like that's one way to start setting a goal. You have a week, you're going to do 2 or 3 things each week, or however many it's going to be, that's going to be related to what your goal is. Pick a goal and then work for that goal. And then, it could be a practice hikes. It could be, hey, I'm going to hike in the morning. Hey, I'm going to try and get 1,000 feet up, 1,000 feet down today, or whatever it might be. Hey, I'm going to try and hike for 1 hour, for 2 hours, for 3 hours today. If you have a certain goal, now you're going to give yourself like, okay, here's my target, and now I can work towards it. If you meet your goal, great. Battle one. If you didn't meet your goal, assess what didn't work, how it was different, and then throw it back on the calendar another week later. Come back to it. How can you change it again? I think in our training example, we we have the example of I'm gonna wake up, eat breakfast, make my bed, and get out the door in 30 minutes. And I'm not sure if everyone could do that, but for some people, that's a challenge. So take out the stopwatch, start, get to bed, get changed, brush your teeth. No, make your bed, eat breakfast, and then get out the door. And then it was 30 minutes. If so, great. If not, what can you do to kind of organize yourself differently to make the goal happen again? So any one of these things can kind of be broken down as a small goal, and find what you think your weakness might be, and then maybe put that on the calendar. Here's just a quick sample calendar that I use for just setting my kids up. So I have 3 kids. They all hiked. They all have hiked before. They all have carried weight. The kids carry about 25 pounds of weight. And so the first week, it might be just hiking for a couple miles, 2 or 3 miles, making sure they get some good cardio in. Again, these are younger kids, so they have kind of the natural cardio built into them. And then I'll throw something different on, each week, maybe a long hike on the weekend where we have a little more time together. Here, I'll give them a fun goal. They always like this one. Here, guys, go. Mark, set, go on week 3. Stopwatch. Try it out. At least one of them liked it. The other 2 were Dad, do I really have to do this? Another long week hike on the weekend. And then here we are kind of increasing the intensity of our hikes. So up to 6 miles. Doing something up to, a long hike on the weekend with weight. And oftentimes for my kids, I'll throw a packs on them, really to make them, it's usually they always cry. I'll be honest with you. If you've never hiked with a pack on, if you throw a 20 or 30 pound pack on your back and do a big hike, maybe 5 to 7 miles, it's really difficult. And you need to kind of mentally get yourself through that before you can kind of enjoy it when you're on the trail. And so I encourage you to again, throw the pack on for weight. It's great if you can train your body for that. But more importantly, to get mentally through it, where you're going to realize this is a challenge. And then that might give you more motivation just to keep training and keep working on it together. So does this help at all, Jonathan? Just to give you some ideas?
Yeah, and you're counting that cardio as different from the hikes,
yeah,
running on a treadmill or something. Yeah,
this works for my lifestyle, my schedule. Like
yeah.
some people are going to the gym 4 times a week, and like
Yeah, I'm right. I
Yeah.
mean, my schedule. Anyway, yes, it helps. Thanks.
yeah,
I guess maybe one last question. Sorry, like I don't want to hog up too much time, but
no worries, man.
like, so I'm thinking about the day that you summit Whitney. It's 4,000 feet up.
Uh-huh.
I think you said 4,000 up and 4,000 back down.
Yep.
So would you recommend that we've made sure we can do 4,000 feet in a day?
No, I just make sure you're in good cardio shape. There's
Okay.
places you can do 4,000 if you have something nearby, like your Mount Diablo. If you want to go hike Mount Diablo up and down,
Yeah.
it's going to take you like all day long to do those 16 miles.
Yeah.
Speaking, that's an awesome hike. If you have the luxury to go to Yosemite, do Half Dome, awesome, or something like that, fantastic. A lot of people don't have that luxury, but you want to just like you train for a marathon, right? Or if I train for a half marathon, which I've done a couple times before, that's 13 miles. I can get away with like running about 8 miles, and then I could just go and hike 13 on the big day, right? I know it's in there. Luckily, also on this type of trip, Mount Whitney is day 6. And so you've had 5 or 6 days to prepare for this. You're in great, your legs are in good shape. Your pack weight is a little bit lighter now. Like you're mentally there, you're at altitude. Your body is actually transforming by the time you get there on day 6. And you're going to be in a much better position to do that big hike. And so build everything up you can, keep improving when you're on the trail, and then you're going to be ready for the big hike on day 6, day 7.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think we do have like I'm going to drop a link in the chat right now. But just going back, if there's any more questions or comments or ideas, feel free to like shoot me an email, send me a text. You can ask for Wyatt. Wyatt, thank you for your tips and ideas as well. Appreciate that, man. I literally answer questions year round. We're planning other trips or looking for ideas. And if you're on this call, I'm so glad you guys are here.